With the help of grants from the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, the City of Lloydminster is hosting a 4-day female hockey camp this November. Josh Horlek has the details.
Today, I'm joined by Cindy Rakimowicz from the City of Lloydminster to talk about a 4-day female hockey camp coming to the city in early November. So to start, this camp was made possible through grants that you received. Could you maybe talk a little bit about those grants?
For sure. So the City of Lloydminster applied for a gender equity grant. So it's a grant that the government of Alberta and the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association put out. And the aim of the grant is to increase participation of females in recreational sport. So we had applied for a hockey camp and we're successful.
And is that something that you'd hope that this camp will accomplish, sort of trying to get more girls into sports and playing hockey?
Absolutely. It's just like gaining interest of our local girls, giving them an opportunity to have female instructors and just gain a new appreciation for the sport of hockey and just give them that opportunity.
And you had mentioned some of the trainers. So who are going to be the coaches and trainers that are going to be on ice for the program?
The coaches are actually our local PWM Steelers coaches are going to be coaching, and then some of their players will be assisting them as well. So
And what types of training will the camp have spread out over the 4 days? Will it just be primarily on ice?
sure, it's a combination of things. So each day there's 4 days, and each day will contain 2 hours of on ice training, 1 hour of off ice training in the field house. So they'll be doing a variety of other activities, and then they'll have a lunch and learn every day. So they'll have their lunch, and we'll bring in a guest speaker, whether that's a nutritionalist or athletic therapist, mental health. So we'll have 4 different trainers come in and train them over the lunch hour.
And do you have any hopes for the camp on what you'd possibly like to see after, potentially seeing more girls joining sports or playing hockey for this season or next?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited about the camp. I think the girls will gain more knowledge, will be motivated to play. The instructors will be mentors, right? They're 17, 18-year-olds Steelers. So it'll just give them that goal to keep practicing, keep developing the skill. And one day they may become a Steeler as well.
And then when's the first day of the camp and where is the camp going to be taking place?
The camp will be November 8th to 11th at the Service Sports Center.
And so where would be the best place for people to find more information on the camp or to register for it?
It's all through the City of Lloydminster, and you can register at Lloydminster/register. And the camp, it's under female hockey camp, and there's 3 age groups. There's U9, U11, and U13. Our U11 age group is actually full, but U9 and U13 has 5 more spots. So
It's time now for this week's retrospect. Here's Blake Nath.
This week in retrospect, lock and load. Back in '91, the RCMP attempts to crack down on illegal poaching.
Big game season is just around the corner in Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Great.
Fish and wildlife officers in both provinces are getting ready for that time of year when poaching is most prevalent. To try and curb it, both Alberta and Saskatchewan have toll-free numbers in place where you can turn in a poacher.
We'll take information from the person calling in about what they saw regarding hunting or poaching activities. They'll relay that back to the field, to the officers in the field, and action will be taken on it.
Fish and wildlife officers say game poaching is not a major problem in the Midwest, but it's a constant concern.
Poaching is always a problem. Anytime anybody is poaching wildlife or basically stealing it from the legitimate user, the person that takes the time to get permission to go on farmer's land, or the person that takes the time to get the license, read the regulations, and do everything right. Anybody who poaches and isn't following the regulations and the rules, they're stealing from those people.
And in '96, A historic deal. In a bid to increase trade and tourism, the border city becomes a twin city.
Lloydminster officials returned home with papers in hand and a deal signed. The border city now has a twin. Lloydminster Mayor Ilston Plant and Planning and Development Director Gary Buchanan were among those who made the trek to Zhilinhot, Inner Mongolia, looking to form a friendship so economic ties can follow.
It's not like us where even if you don't know someone, you can pick up the phone and make a deal with them. They're very interested and very set on having that relationship, and that's very important to them. So this is really one of the first steps to cement that relationship. So
Zhilinhot is similar to the border city, with business focusing on agriculture and oil.
there's a large oil field about 90 kilometers north of town, and they're developing that resource. And so again, we can assist them. That it's a heavy oil, very similar to what we have here. And so our local expertise and knowledge can be utilized in that area.
Border city residents and businesses will not only be selling technology to Zhilinhot, there are also several things they can buy from the new twin city.
Fine clothing that they produce. There's other materials there that are available to us. Tourism as an industry, I'm sure a lot of people want to go to China and see the culture and tour around.
And that's all for this week in retrospect.
Retrospect this week is brought to you by Webb's Ford. Worth your while to drive the extra mile. Webb's Ford in Vermilion.
Now Shelby Clark will take a first look at this week's weather.
Thanks so much, Jasmine. Now taking our first look at your weather forecast. For here in the border city, we are sitting at 14 degrees. From that, you may think it might be a bit cooler today, but that sun actually really saved us, and it is feeling a lot warmer outside with a mix of some sun and clouds. So hopefully everybody's enjoying that nice weather, and we will be seeing nicer temperatures throughout the week. Taking a look at temperatures across the region for Alberta and Saskatchewan, most are sitting around that 13 to 14 degree mark there. Provost and Vegreville a bit warmer, sitting at 15 degrees, and Lac La Biche is the coolest, sitting at 10 degrees. Over on this end here, most are sitting at that 13-14 degree mark as well, while Maidstone and Macklin are a bit warmer at 16 degrees, and North Battleford is seeing 17 degrees. But speaking of North Battleford, overnight they will be going down to a low of 6 degrees throughout the night, so they will be cooling down quite a bit with a little bit more clouds in sight there. But tomorrow they will be warming up to a high of 21 with a little bit more sun peeking behind those clouds, so they will be seeing a lot warmer temperature tomorrow. Switching over to Cold Lake, overnight they'll be going down to 4 there overnight with a little bit more clouds in the sky as well, and tomorrow they will be seeing around the same temperature with a high of 16 with a mix of some sun and cloud. And switching over to our school day forecast for kids here in the border city, they'll be starting off a bit cooler at 5 degrees starting off for the day with a lot more cloudier skies, but throughout the day for recess and around lunchtime they will warm up to around 14 degrees there with a mix of some sun and cloud, and by the time the school day is over it will be at 19 degrees with a little bit more sun there peeking behind that cloudier day tomorrow, so it will be warming up quite a bit. And now switching over to our 3-day forecast for here in the border city. Tuesday we will be warming up, as I was saying, to a high of 20 degrees there and a low of 4 degrees with a mix of some sun and cloud. Wednesday we'll actually be seeing our warmest with a high of 23, but we will be seeing around a 60% chance of some precipitation on Wednesday, so expect to see a chance of some showers that day. And Thursday we will cool down there around 10 degrees cooler to a high of 13 there, but we will be seeing a lot more sun. That's a first look at your weather forecast. We'll have more news coming up after the break.
Welcome back. Data from the 2020 Alberta Agricultural Industry Profile shows that women hold over a third of jobs within the agricultural industry. This number is growing yearly, yet women within the industry are finding that they're still fighting an uphill battle. Jillian Code has the story.
Today on Primetime Local News, we're talking about gender discrimination within the agricultural industry. I'm joined today by Megs Reynolds, who is a former ag industry worker. She posted a tweet about gender discrimination within the ag industry that generated a lot of discussion on ag Twitter. The post reads, "Why are so many in agriculture still pushing the farm wife narrative? Show me another industry where the wife is labeled and defined by her husband's role. Let's recognize women as individuals, not extensions of their husbands." Meg, could you just tell me about what prompted you to write this tweet?
Well, it's not the first time I've tried to have this conversation. I'm no longer grain farming, but I was a grain farmer for about 7 years and still am involved in agriculture. And I just struggle with the assumptions that are out there that the wife in that partnership shouldn't be involved in business discussions, doesn't understand the equipment, shouldn't talk to the banker, shouldn't be able to see herself as a farmer or call herself a farmer if she chooses to. I fully support women claiming the role and the title that empowers them and that they want. I'm not against that whatsoever. What I have an issue with is that industry or people within or out of the industry seeing a woman that is married to a man that farms and saying, oh, she's a farm wife, that means she just cooks meals, takes care of the kids, and doesn't know what's going on the farm or shouldn't be involved in the business side of things.
And you made a really good point in your tweet. Like, I personally can't think of any other industries where the wife is labeled by what her partner or husband does for a living. It almost seems a bit archaic to me, going back to, back when women weren't able to hold jobs outside of the home, where they would be a housewife, or if they live on a farm wife. But obviously jobs have evolved since then. It just seems that the language within the ag industry maybe just hasn't evolved as much.
Well, I think, to your point of saying that traditional farm wife role, there's a lot of women that, are on the farm and married to a farmer that the role is very similar. Those women they were cooking meals, they were raising massive gardens, they were caring for the animals, they were running equipment or trucking, they were still involved in all those aspects. I think, when you look back 100 years or 70 years or all along that time frame, society saw women as taking more of a back seat. And so I don't think the role per se has changed. It's that we need to realize we're not 100 years ago. We need to stop seeing women as less than and seeing them as capable of doing and being involved in whatever they want to do. And with no other industry doing that, there are other industries where you could have a military wife, but that's not her job. That is a title that is one of the many titles that she chooses to have, and that identifies her as part of a community where there's a strong support network, where those women are also living with men in the military, or it could be women in the military and husbands, and understanding the challenges of that, and it's a support network. That doesn't mean they're not also teachers and doctors and nurses and what have you. That's not their career, right? It's that group, that support network. And I think in agriculture, a lot of times, especially now with social media, you see women using the term farm wife as a branding to find that community. There's a lot that, market that role. They're selling stuff, they're doing videos on cooking, all of that. There's nothing wrong with that. But we need to stop assuming that the woman on the farm isn't capable of more than just cooking and raising kids. And that's what's wrong right now. When the salesperson walks past the woman at the farm show, or walks past the woman in the field to talk to the husband, when the women at the farm shows are sexually harassed, when women working in agriculture as agronomists or selling product are sexually harassed on farms, they're stalked, they're verbally abused by those in industry. When we react to what women put out there in a different way, because we see that they shouldn't have that opinion, that voice, that we want them to take that step back in our actions and our retaliations and reflect that. That's what needs to change.
So when someone is subject to that, throughout the course of their job, I can imagine how frustrating that must be.
I mean, I think right now, probably 70% of the students doing agronomy are women. Like, there's an amazing rush of women coming up in the industry, and maybe that's going to help bring about the change, because there'll be enough of them to say, actually, no, that's not okay. You don't get to talk to me. You don't get to feel my leg up while I'm sitting with you, in a combine or in a truck checking crops or doing something. Like, that's not appropriate. Or just get to the point where the guy that only has daughters, everyone's not asking him what's he's going to do with the farm one day. Like, the daughters are seen as a possibility for taking, being the next generation. And even if you don't leave the industry, there's so many women who have just stepped back. They cannot deal with what kind of went on the weekend all the time. And that's just social media. That's not the the late night calls to the hotel rooms. That's not the people trying to, you know, stalk you at the farm shows, corner you somewhere. Like it's just, yeah, it's bad.
And that brings me to my last question, which is how can members of the ag industry, you know, no matter the gender, take the time to reflect and make the changes to be a good ally to women in the industry?
I think we need to see women supported to share their stories and to share their truths. And women also need to support women in that. You know, some women are very, you can look back through the post, but they were very upset about it. And again, there was nothing, I'm not against them and how they want their role to be at all. I want to support that, but they shouldn't then be against the woman that wants to be labeled the farmer. And men need to be the ones that are also standing up for women, calling stuff out publicly, calling stuff out privately, because unfortunately, there's a lot of people that I can say something and it's not going to carry very far. But if that guy, that male farmer, that male salesperson gets up and stands up for something when he sees it going on, or stands up for something online and calls it out and says, actually, this is inappropriate, you can't do that. That's what needs to happen. And that's going to resonate stronger with a lot of people, more so than anything that I or someone else could do.
Megs, thank you for your time today.
Very welcome. Thanks for your time.
Now we'll take a look at your egg prices. The MLB regular season wrapped up this past weekend. The Toronto Blue Jays did everything in their power to play baseball in October. However, the cards were not in their hands. Jace Mackey and Evan Kenny have more on the Blue Jays season and what we could see in the postseason.
Well, the Major League Baseball playoff picture is set. 10 teams will be duking it out to win the World Series. And unfortunately for Canadian baseball fans, the Blue Jays will not be part of the action. Joining me to talk a little bit more about this is our sports reporter, Evan Kenny. Evan, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Jace.
Now, so we'll get right into it. Obviously, the Jays missed the postseason going into this. They are missing it by just one game. They're trailing some divisional rivals, New York and Boston. While they didn't get the result they hoped for this season, was it a total loss?
No, Jace, definitely wasn't a total loss. You know, a 91 win season for the Toronto Blue Jays. They just missed the postseason by one win, as both the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox had 92 wins. So definitely not a failure. You know, in plenty of other years, 91 wins does get you into the postseason, or even in other divisions, 91 wins gets you to the postseason. Even, Jace, you know, looking at an individual aspect throughout this team, there was tons of success. You know, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. set a new record for most home runs by a player who's 22 years old, you know, breaking records from MLB legends like Joe DiMaggio. You know, a guy in Marcus Semien set a record for most home runs by a second baseman in MLB history. So there's definitely some bright spots, and definitely was not a failure of a season, Jace.
So sticking with the Blue Jays now, obviously this is still a young team, but going into this offseason, how is it going to impact the core of the team?
Yeah, Jace, like you said, it's a young team. You know, this extra off season, it'll just improve this team. Like I said, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who is their best player, is just 22 years old. There's still plenty of time for him to develop and possibly get even better. You know, even guys, Bo Bichette's a young player. Kevin Biggio, that's a guy who, you know, could really improve over an off season. As well, Jace, you know, last year was a shortened season. So these guys haven't even played, you know, 3 full seasons yet in the MLB. So just that extra time will definitely help them. It will be interesting to see how the team does after free agency. A guy that I already mentioned, Marcus Semien, he will be a free agent coming up. He has said that he does want to come back to the Blue Jays. However, you know, he is going to be looking to sign a big ticket after setting that record. As well, Blue Jays ace pitcher Robbie Ray is also up for free agency. So this will be interesting, you know, to see how that impacts the team. But with the group that they currently have, the offseason will do nothing except for help this core.
So now let's shift focus over to the postseason that we have in front of us. Wild card matchups are starting on Tuesday. I think New York is playing Boston. So can we kind of go through who do you like in those games?
Yeah, Jace, for me, I'm a big defense wins championships kind of guy. And when it comes to baseball, I think pitching wins you championships. You can look back all the way to, really the San Francisco Giants dynasty, I think is a perfect example of what pitching can do for a team. So just talking about the Yankees versus the Red Sox, I think the Yankees have one of the best bullpens, if not the best, in the MLB. So I'm going to take them. However, I don't think they will make it past the Tampa Bay Rays. Tampa Bay has won 7 straight series against the Yankees. Why not make it 8? They've really had their number throughout this entire season. Continuing on with the American League, the Chicago White Sox and Houston Astros will be duking it out in their series. I have this one going to the White Sox. Like I said, Jace, pitching really is important when it comes to the postseason. And when you got Giolito, Keuchel, Lance Lynn, and Rodon just in your starting rotation, that's pretty lethal. Now, as we take a look at the National League side here, LA Dodgers will be taking on the St. Louis Cardinals in their wild card game. I know it's pretty crazy to be saying the reigning champions in the LA Dodgers are in the wild card as well. They were the second best team standings-wise this past season. I have them beating the St. Louis Cardinals. I also have them beating the San Francisco Giants, who finished just above them in the standings this year. The Dodgers had 3 pitchers within the top 10 of the league in ERA. When a guy like Max Scherzer is not your team's ace, that's pretty deadly. And then in that other series, sticking with this theme, defense wins championships. The Milwaukee Brewers, I believe they will take this. Corbin Burns this past season, you could argue, is the best pitcher in the MLB. As well, you could argue that the Milwaukee Brewers have the best closer in Josh Hader. So, Jace, I think I got to go with those matchups. In the end, I think I'm going to say the Chicago White Sox make it out of the American League, and I'm going to go with the LA Dodgers coming out of the National League, Jace.
Well, we still have a lot of baseball in front of us, but within the next month, we will have the 2021 World Series champion. We'll know who it's going to be. Evan, thanks a lot for taking this time and talking with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Jace.
Now Shelby Clark will take a look at temperatures around Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Thanks so much, Jasmine. Now starting off, we'll be taking a look at temperatures across central Alberta and Saskatchewan here over on the Alberta side. Edmonton and Red Deer, the warmest, they're sitting at 14 degrees. 13 in Rocky Mountain House and Athabasca is a bit cooler. That's 12 degrees, while Whitecourt, Jasper, and Edson are the coolest at that single-digit mark, sitting at 7 and 8 degrees there. And switching over to the Saskatchewan side here, Cold Lake is at 13 degrees, so temperatures are a bit warmer over on this end. 14 in Meadow Lake and here in the border city, while North Battleford is the warmest at 17 degrees, and the rest are sitting at 16. But over in this area here, there is elevated pollution levels are expected to be occurring from smoke coming from the north of Hudson Bay, but hopefully conditions will improve later this week, and we will see my forecast later on. Now switching over to our northern region of the provinces here, they are looking a little bit cooler, while Uranium City is at 8 degrees, 10 degrees in Stony Rapids, and 9 in Wollaston Lake. South End is at 12 degrees, and Flin Flon is the warmest. They're sitting at 14, and the rest are seeing that 11-degree mark. Over on this end, 9 degrees in Grand Prairie, so a little bit cooler over on the Alberta side here. 10 degrees in Peace River and Slave Lake and Fort Chipewyan. 11 in Fort McMurray, and high level is at 8 degrees. And switching over to our southern region of the provinces, as you can see, they are looking a lot warmer, reaching that 20-degree point there. 19 in Lethbridge. Calgary is a bit cooler, sitting at 13 degrees. Coronation is at 15, and Banff is a bit warmer. They're surprisingly at 18 degrees, and Medicine Hat is the warmest, sitting at 22. Over on this end here, most are seeing that 24-degree mark, while Moose Jaw and Yorkton are a bit warmer at 25 degrees, and Kindersley still a bit cooler, sitting at 15, but Estevan has reached 30 degrees right now, so they are looking at warmer temperatures. And looking back across the region at temperatures overnight tonight, we are cooling down quite a bit than what we were seeing compared to last week. Meadow Lake will actually be going down to a low of -1 tonight, with a little bit more clear skies. A low of 5 degrees in Isle La Crosse, so we will be seeing the warmest warmest temperature there. Actually, Unity will be seeing a low of 6 degrees, but most will be seeing more cloudier skies tonight. A low of 3 degrees in Pearsland, Bonnyville, Paradise Hill, Provost, and Wainwright, and Myrna will be seeing a low of 2 degrees. So we are cooling down a bit as we head more into this fall season. And switching over to temperatures tomorrow across the region, we will be warming up just a couple degrees warmer there in most spots, while Isle Cross, Lac La Biche, and Edmonton will be seeing the coolest there at 14 degrees, but down in Provost and Macklin, they will be seeing the warmest there at 26 tomorrow. And ending off with our 7-day forecast here, Tuesday, Wednesday, as I was saying, we will be warming up to a high of 20 on Tuesday and 23 on Wednesday, but we will be seeing around a 60% chance of some precipitation there on Wednesday. And Thursday, we will cool back down to a high of 13, but we will be seeing a little bit more sun. And this weekend, we will be cooling down to around 14, 15 degrees throughout the weekend there. And starting off next week on Monday, we'll be cooling down a little bit more to a high of 10 degrees. That is another look at your weather forecast. We'll have more news coming up after the break.
SGI has been named as MAD Canada's 2021 Citizen of Distinction. I'm joined to talk a little bit more about this with the spokesman for SGI, Tyler McMurtry. Tyler, thanks for being here today. First of all, can you just tell us a little bit more about what this recognition is?
This award essentially is given to groups, individuals, organizations that contribute to the anti-impaired driving movement in Canada. And SGI is obviously very, very honored to receive this award. It's a recognition of the efforts, not only by SGI, but of other groups working in partnership with SGI, law enforcement, groups like MAD and SAD and other organizations that all share that same goal of making our roads safer by eliminating the #1 cause of fatality on Saskatchewan roads, which is impaired driving.
So how did SGI come to be nominated for this and then eventually win?
Well, we were nominated by MAD volunteers here in Saskatchewan, and that's something that we are tremendously grateful for, of course. We do a lot of work alongside MAD on a number of fronts when it comes to impaired driving. We partner with them on a number of initiatives. On the awareness side, we also, of course, work closely with law enforcement with our monthly traffic safety spotlights, which I frequently talk to the folks at Primetime Local about. And we often focus on impaired driving as a result of that as well. And there is also funding that SGI provides for traffic enforcement positions and equipment and resources for law enforcement to help them catch impaired drivers.
Now, SGI, as you mentioned, SGI partners with a lot of different groups to help not only get that message out there, but also, spread awareness and encourage people to not drive impaired. So how are things going when it comes to the traffic safety spotlights that focus on impaired driving and a lot of the work that SGI does?
Well, overall, when it comes to impaired driving, we have seen very, very significant progress in Saskatchewan over the past decade in particular, and that's a result of many of those partnerships that I referred to earlier, the work that we've done with law enforcement, increased awareness on the part of SGI and other organizations, but also legislation and enforcement play a role in that too. And so the results are our roads are getting safer, and that's great to see. Now, of course, when it comes to impaired driving, the fight isn't over, and it won't be over for some time as long as people still are making that decision to drive impaired. And we still see upwards of 400 people or more on average arrested or cited for an impaired driving offense in Saskatchewan every single month. So police wouldn't be catching that many people doing it if there weren't people doing it. But we have seen fewer people dying and being injured and causing collisions as a result of impaired driving. I'll just give you an example. In 2020, the most recent year we have complete statistics available, we saw 36 people lose their lives as a result of impaired driving collisions. Of course, that is far, far too many. We want to see that number at 0 because impaired driving is 100% preventable. But that does represent a 35% drop over the average over the previous decade. So we have seen those numbers come down very significantly. From even 10 years ago, they were much higher, and they've been trending downward steadily. We need to keep that up. We also are seeing fewer people injured because fatalities are not the only measurement of whether our roads are safe. When we're talking about injuries, people getting very severely injured in road crashes, you obviously want to reduce those numbers as well. And we have seen a 31% drop in 2020 compared to the previous decade. So that is that's a very significant, and that's 31% drop over the average of the previous 10 years. So even those numbers are coming down. If you compare those numbers to a decade ago, the drop is even more significant, and that's great to see. We want to see those numbers continue to drop because, as I mentioned, impaired driving is 100% preventable. There's never a good reason to get behind the wheel if you're impaired. There's always a better choice. And so when we talk about the efforts that SGI has undertaken, it's great to see that those have been recognized. We're not the only ones talking about impaired driving. We're not the only ones fighting impaired driving. MAD is a big part of that as well. And that's why we're so pleased to partner with them on initiatives like the crashed car displays that we see in cities around Saskatchewan, the Smart Wheels bus that goes to schools and teaches young kids about the dangers of impaired driving before they're kind of at that age where they're going to be making those choices about consuming impairing substances, which I think, as we know, happens in high schools. There's a high school program that MAD delivers, that SGI sponsors, that goes to school assemblies in high schools. So there's a number of different partnership opportunities that we have with MAD and other organizations as well. But as I said, SGI is very, very honored by this award, but we realize that there is much more work to do.
Well, it's great to see that those numbers are going in the right direction. And while we have you here, Tyler, I'll give you a chance to kind of go through some tips for people. Obviously, it's pretty easy not to drive impaired. It's pretty simple, but what are some tips for people to keep in mind to help make that a reality?
Yeah, that's a great point. There's always a better option, but what we talk about always is making a plan before you are drinking or using drugs, doing anything that impairs your thinking, because you're making less good decisions when you're impaired. I think we're all familiar with how that works. So making a plan before you go out, and if you're in your community, if you have taxis or rideshare or public transit available, that might be an option. Or if you're going out with a group of friends or going to be hanging out with a group of friends, plan to have a designated driver. One person who stays sober gets everybody else home safe. Now, if you are in a position where somebody maybe hasn't made that plan and is looking like they're going to drive impaired, as your friend, as somebody who cares about them, as their friend, you need to be a good wingman. We talk about that all the time, the importance of stopping that person from getting behind the wheel where they might end up killing themselves or somebody else and making a decision that will affect them for the rest of their life, or or end their life as well. So that's another really important thing to
I'm joined here now with instructor and author Guy WINDSOR. Now, for our viewers who aren't aware, could you give us your background and how you got started with swordsmanship and medieval and Renaissance martial arts?
Basically, my parents were taking weapons off me when I was very little. So I've always been into weapons and martial arts and things like that. And I was doing sport fencing in the late 80s. And then when I got to university, I met some people who were similarly frustrated with sport fencing. It's a bit too artificial. It's a bit too much of a sport for us. We wanted to do real sword fighting, as whatever that may be. And so we discovered these books, historical sources that actually explain how to use a sword. So, for example, a book from the early 17th century explaining how to fence with a rapier. Or later on, we found a manuscript from the early 15th century explaining knightly combat with like daggers and long swords and horses and spears and things. So that sort of became, in the 90s, I got really, really into that. And I somehow managed to finish my degree and get a job and all that sort of thing. But really the focus of my emotional life was sword practice on Wednesday nights and most weekends. And then in 2000, I decided to teach historical swordsmanship for a living. And in 2001, I moved to Helsinki and opened the School of European Swordsmanship, which is still running there today.
Yes, I was reading your bio and it does seem very interesting how you got started in all of this. And you've released books in the past, but with your newest book, The WINDSOR Method, what does this book focus on?
Most training, in any art, most training tends to be done alone. So for example, most professional musicians, even if they play in an orchestra, they show up to work and practice in the orchestra, but they also have to do their own practice at home. Because when you're on your own, you can really focus on specifically what exactly you personally need to work on. And particularly during the pandemic, many of my sword people were stuck at home and, had no option but to train on their own. And I already had an online course on how to train alone. And that's fine for like specific exercises. And if you like rapiers, do this. And if you like long swords, do that. But there's a mental approach to it, or a sort of theoretical approach to it, that I felt really, you can't really teach that over a series of videos. It's much better in a book. And so I wrote the book, which is basically, I can summarize it for you in 2 sentences. Find out what works for you and then do that, right? And that's 2 separate things. And finding out what works for you is actually harder than it sounds, because you see someone doing something and you go, oh, I want to do that. And you ask them how they learned how to do it, and they tell you, and you try it, and it completely doesn't work because you have a different body, you have a different mind, you have a different background, you're just a different person. So figuring out what approach works for you is part of it. And then figuring out how you're actually going to act on, having found out what works for you, how you're actually going to actually do it. So, I mean, for example, you may find that you have short hamstrings. Great. Okay. So you found out you've got this weakness in your, or this thing is stopping you from doing what you want to do. So how do you make your hamstrings not go? Well, you have these various stretching routines. Well, how do you figure out which of those stretching routines is right for you? And then how often should you do it? How do you work that out? And when do you know that you're done? And so basically what the book is about is figuring out what works for you and then how you do that.
So would you say that this book is best for beginners who are just starting to get into this?
I deliberately wrote it so it should be useful for literally anybody. So even if you're not into swords, it should still be useful, because if you're, if let's say you're a runner, or you play football, or you're a musician, or basically if you're a person who is at all interested in how your body works, and if you're at all interested in developing skill in any area, one student of mine is a data scientist, and she's like, oh my God, this is how I should do data science. I was like, I don't know anything about data science. But no, it's because it's the thing is, it's the approach. And that approach, yeah, most of my experience in this sort of thing comes from historical swordsmanship, but the approach of how do you get better at a thing you're trying to do, that actually works for pretty much anything.
So if anyone is looking to purchase your newest book or any of your other works, where is the best place to go?
They can get them anywhere that books are sold. Honestly, get them from the library. If you ask the library for it, they can get it in for you. If that doesn't work, your local bookshop can order it in. And if you prefer to shop online, you can, of course, also do that. And if you want to find like the books page, which has like links to the various online shops, if you go to guywindsor.net/solo, that'll take you straight to that page.
Thank you so much for your time today, Guy.
And taking a final look at your 7-day forecast here, Tuesday and Wednesday we will be seeing our warmest with 20 on Tuesday and 23 on Wednesday, but we will be seeing a chance of showers on Wednesday. And throughout the week and on the weekend we will be cooling down to around 14-15 degrees with a mix of some sun and cloud. And starting off next week on Monday, we will be cooling down to a high of 10.
Thank you for joining us on Primetime Local News, and you can watch the second hour on CITL.